So welcome to the Global Discussions with creatives, leaders and thinkers. Today, I'm joined by Tim Hughes. You're very welcome to the podcast, Tim. Let's begin by asking you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are, the journey you're on, what you're focused on at the moment, and introduce yourself to our international audience. So over to you, Tim.
Okay, thanks, Simon. Well, I'm Tim Hughes. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. My background is that I'm a salesperson. I've been in corporate sales for 25 years and suddenly got into this social media thing. With Adam Gray, my business partner, we set up our own company called DLA Ignite. And what we do is that we transform companies to use digital. So not a lot of people think that digital is about applications. It's not. It's about empowering your people to do digital things and to make sure that you've got digital processes. That usually starts off in the sales department. And I'm well known for the book, Social Selling Techniques to Influence Buyers and Changemakers. This is the second edition. It's just come out. The first edition is a runaway bestseller. Came out in 2016, and I've just updated it, and it came out at the end of November 2022. Trying to remember which year we're in. So we start off in sales because that's kind of easy to measure. We can increase your revenues by 30%, reduce your the customer buying cycle by 20%. That's something easy to measure. And then we move on out through the organization, transforming through using social media as a strategy. And we're the only company in the world that does this.
Well, thanks for the introduction, Tim. That's very helpful. Just in terms of the book, you were holding it up there a second ago.
There's one just right by me.
Yeah, you had to update it recently, because I imagine since when it was first published to this now new second edition that includes a lot of new sections, a lot has possibly changed. Like we've been through quite an interesting number of years. So what's new? What have you had to add? What were you focused on with this new second edition?
Well, the first copy was written in 2015. It was published in 2016, and there's a number of things that have kind of fallen by the wayside. So there used to be this thing called clout. I don't know if you remember it, which was a measurement of people's influence, and they had to basically, that all got canned because of GDPR back in 2018, and it talks about that in the book. So there was a number of things that had fallen by the wayside, and also as a business, when it first came out, we'd only just set up the company. And we've now been going for 6 years. So there's all the things that we've learned with our customers. So, about how to make a company digital dominant, how it's so important now to know who the leading technical, commercial and digital influencer is in your space. The fact that through COVID, buyers, job seekers, investors, so everybody is basically transferred from the physical analog world into digital. And so we have this mismatch at the moment where we have sales and marketing departments still sitting in the physical analog world, but everybody else is in digital. And what I'm trying to do is actually explain that the basis of sales and marketing is you need to fish where the fish are. And right now you're not doing that, which is why we're seeing so many layoffs, which is we're seeing sales and marketing departments still thinking that it's 1990 or probably even 1980, and still going ahead and doing all those things. And of course, everybody's moved on. What I wanted to do was also go out to practitioners, so people that are doing this already, because people seem to think that social or digital is some sort of future state. And it's not. It's actually the current state, or if not the state we've been in for a number of years. I wanted to get people that are already doing this. So I've gone to Mercer, RingCentral, Telstra, Ericsson. I've got a headhunter to say, this is what you need to do if you want to be headhunted in this digital world. I've got Chris Fleming, who's the CEO of Cyberhawk, who runs a digital business. And he explains in 2 pages about what it means to run a digital business. Now, he did this 2 years ago. So this is what I'm saying, is that if you're not a digital business and empowered your people and have digital processes, you're already 2 years behind. I've got Eric Doyle. Eric runs a LinkedIn Live on Thursday mornings. which is, it gets 250, 300 people joining it, which is just unheard of in terms of like LinkedIn Live and podcasts, and why he set it up and the importance of community. And he talks about community, how to build a community. And I think all of those are practical things that people need to know about in the digital world. So that's what I kind of collated all that stuff together. And the book has 306 pages rather than the previous version, which has 187.
So that's quite an update, and I suppose a lot's changed when you look at it in that context. And I do remember the social clout scores from back then, and yeah, what a different world we live in today. And it's interesting when you talk about businesses that you had no choice but to go online, I suppose, for a couple of years. But even today, there are still some companies that are so far behind or still living in I think you termed it the analog world, as opposed to the digital world. The other question I've got for you, if I can, Tim, is you mentioned LinkedIn Live there a minute ago, which is one of the sort of social audio platforms that are out there. And I know yourself, you're quite active on social audio. You do an awful lot of online engagement, of course. Why wouldn't you, with a book called Social Selling? But you've won some awards and some accreditations along the way. The 16th most influential marketer in the world. I think that was issued by Brand 24 last year.
Yes, 16.
Top 50 thought leader from Thinkers 360. You're in the power list of the top 200 biggest voices in leadership last year as well. So I wanted to really ask you about your business is 6 years now. You're driving this sort of agenda. You obviously grasp the opportunity here, but you're very active yourself now in social audio. So could you maybe just unpack that a little bit and the importance of that, and maybe that building that digital relationship via whether it's LinkedIn Live or Twitter Spaces, or what are your views on that world at the moment, Tim?
Yeah, we are great believers that you need to be able to walk digital corridors and have digital conversations. You need to have an understanding. 20 years ago, before PowerPoint and Excel came along, you had to learn all those things, and people had them on their CVs. Now you wouldn't do that because everybody is expected to have those skills. And we're back into that situation where it is expected now that you understand LinkedIn, you understand Twitter, you understand Facebook, or and you also need to understand all these other things. Now, why is that important? Because your clients, your future clients, and your prospects are there. So this isn't because I'm not saying this because Tim Hughes thinks this is a good idea. It's not because of my opinion. The data shows this. Salesforce, McKinsey, HubSpot. I could go on and says the buyer, the job hunter, they've all shifted to digital. So this isn't about understanding LinkedIn or a tool. It's understanding digital as a platform. So what we do is that we teach people not LinkedIn or Twitter. We teach people how to be social and what that means today. What does it mean to be social? And therefore you can pick that up and go to Instagram or go to Twitter. Someone was giving me, I was interviewing somebody yesterday, and I'm actually going to interview them on my podcast to talk about how you can be a thought leader, or how you can go to be a thought leader. And this particular person said, what he did is he did a social audio and Clubhouse. He promoted it on Twitter, on his Twitter. Somebody from Twitter came to the Clubhouse to hear him speak. He then saw that person in the audience. He went to their LinkedIn profile, connected to them. They had a conversation on LinkedIn. That person's a client. And that is how we do business today. And therefore, that's what we mean by the ability to walk digital corridors and have digital conversations. This is not a nice to have. And there may be people out there going, well, I don't want to do that. Well, I'm sorry, but this is digital today. This is the way that we do business. This is the way that people expect you to be there and on digital. We've been doing LinkedIn Lives now for coming up to 2 years. So I run a podcast like you. I've done a podcast now for 4 years, which is a classic talking heads like this, asking clever people stupid questions to get them to share their insights. But also what we do is that we run a LinkedIn Live on Fridays, which is where 8 of us from my organization get together and we discuss a subject. And this came about during the pandemic. Was that I was running a meeting internally, and the whole idea was that we got together and just had a chat. There was no agenda. The salespeople hated it because they always said you have to have an agenda for a meeting. But I said, we'll just get together and chat and have a joke and tell us what's inspired you. And it always turned to work. And then someone said, why don't we do this and externalize it? This is such a great format. So that's what we do. And we've now been running that for nearly 2 years. And what we're seeing is we talk about people who is the leading technical and commercial digital influencer in your market or vertical. So what you described to me as that, and what buyers are now looking for is that person in that particular vertical, whether it's payroll or accounting and the thing is that we're in this world where it's a bit like in the days where people were just populated on the east coast of America, and some people said, right, I'm going to get in a wagon and now I'm going to drive west. And this is where you've got your ability to stake out the ground, whoever you are, whether you're a big company or a small company, and stake it out and say, right, we are going to be the world's leading payroll company in digital. And what we're going to do is we're going to do digital things. We're going to set up a podcast. We're going to be the people where people are going to come to and listen to about payroll. We're going to be the community that people are going to come to. We're also going to provide the best content, so not brochures and brocureware, which nobody is interested in. Content that people actually find insightful and thought-provoking. And that's the opportunity for all organizations today, to actually go out and stake out that. And we're already seeing that. So there's a company in Aberdeen called OGV Energy. So that's Oscar Golf Victor Energy, and they were a magazine. They then became an online magazine, and they're now running a LinkedIn Live every month, where they run it as in effect as a magazine format and get people from different parts of the industry to come on and talk on just for 10 minutes. And what they're doing again is they're being the technical and commercial digital influencer in oil and gas. And so that's why we do it. So just some context about it, and then the opportunity for people themselves to be able to go out and grab that space for themselves.
That's some great insight, Tim. And I remember conversations going back many years where some industries, whether it was oil and gas or whether it was whatever industry, didn't necessarily think of themselves digitally, because it was kind of something, oh, that won't work for my industry. That doesn't work for my type of business. Whereas now everybody has to be digitally savvy, And I love the term, being able to walk those digital corridors. And your example that you gave, where there were 3 or 4 different interactions on 3 or 4 different digital platforms, and that person ends up as a customer, a paying customer, real tangible business. That's great. And the question I've got for you then, just on that, Tim, is I know obviously you're the CEO, you're the founder, you've won lots of awards, you've got a great book out, but you still also list yourself as all of those things, but also a content creator.
I do.
And I wanted to ask you about that, because we've touched on things like influencers, who's the most influential person, who's sort of the spokesperson in your area, but you've got influencers, you've got creators, haven't you? And then you've got these people who are really trying to make a difference in there, but there's a lot of noise out there. So what advice do you have for people who need to create more content, but not just content for content's sake, content that's actually going to be meaningful, listen to, whether it's live or whether it's pre-packaged? What would you say to that?
Well, we know, because the data shows, that the buyer has moved on to digital. When a buyer comes to social media, their search is very different than if they go to Google. Now, what happens is that people generally do both. But what happens is that when you go to Google, it doesn't give you the answer you want. Great example is this. Go to Google after this and type in, what's the best CRM system in the world? And you'll get 10,000 CRM companies basically buying that search, and it doesn't answer. If you go and say, what's the capital of Nigeria? It gives you the answer, but not if you go, not certain business things. Whereas if you come to social media, you're more likely to get that, because what you'll do is you'll find content from your network. So that's the important thing. The important thing to understand is that when buyers search, they get it from within their network. So if you're not within those buyers' networks, you're not going to be found. So, for example, let me just take you through some of the things that we do. So we know that the buyers are on social media. We know that they're looking for content. We know that they're looking for insight, because we've done research with people like Telstra, and we did an implementation there. And what they found was that people come to social media, funnily enough, to be social. They don't come to social media to read brochures. So this whole thing about employee advocacy, where people are taking brochures that nobody will read elsewhere and pushing them out through social media, doesn't work. In fact, what you do is you actually train the algorithm to ignore you. What people are there for, they're looking for insights. Edelman Trust report shows that people are looking for, influencers, and they're looking for insight, and they're looking for people to tell them things they don't know. So there's lots and lots of content out there, but most of the time when you go to your LinkedIn profile, you're going, boring, 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 boring. Oh, that's interesting. And our job, all of us, is to be the, that's interesting, rather than the boring, 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 boring. You know, anybody can produce a brochure and push it out on social media, and it will be instantly ignored. And so what we do is that we know that our buyers are on social media. We know that they're looking for content. So we create content every day. I write a blog every day, and I put it out on social media, and I'm the CEO. Chris Fleming, who runs a digital organization, I talked about him earlier on, does exactly the same. Now, we create a piece of content. It may be video, because different people will consume different content. So certain days I will do a 2-minute video. Other days I write a blog. So before I came on to see this podcast, I had 15 minutes spare. So I basically started an introduction to a blog, because I know I need to be constantly creating content. If I'm not creating content, and I'm sure that people out there were saying, well, I can't do that. That's fine, but you will be invisible to your clients. Now you need to, so you have to make that decision. Am I invisible, or do I want to be visible to my clients? And what happens? I remember Janice B. Gordon, the sales influencer, coming to me 3 years ago and saying, I'm thinking of doing a podcast. I said, right, I'll be the first one on it. 3.5 years later, she's interviewed, I don't know how many people. I was the first person she interviewed. She just interviewed me again, because if I've got a book out, if we hadn't mentioned. Janice basically has just got, content. So when you go to social media and you start searching, which is what your buyers will do, who's going to be the person that's going to come to the top of the pile? Janice is, or I am, or anybody else that's been creating content. The more content that you create, the more library that you create, the more opportunity it is that you're going to be the person that's going to be in front of your buyers, and the more likely that they're going to be, when they search, they're going to find you. So an example, Namos Computing, they're a 100-person Oracle reseller. We transformed their sales team to social. A buyer was online LinkedIn, searching for whatever it is that they sell, Oracle Consulting, found a salesperson, because we've taught them how to write their LinkedIn profile so they look interesting. They said, you look interesting. We'd obviously explained to them how to build their network, so they were in the buyer's network. Great content. They said, you look interesting. You look like you can solve the problem we have. Then there was a conversation, just like you get between buyers and salespeople. That turned into a $2.6 million deal. They've taken another $500,000 out of that client. Now, this is what I'm saying, is that there are people, serious people, who are following our methodology, that are making serious money out of being on social and doing the right thing. One of our clients has got a 10,000 to 1 ROI. They've just got $500 million, it's $500 million, not million, $500 million deal in their pipeline, and they're only a $400 million company. It's transformational, purely by being on social and being active where their buyers are, and doing it, and not being spammy, and doing it in the right way. And that's what we need to do, and that's what we do, and that's what we teach our clients to do.
Yeah, I love that. And creating that meaningful content that's going to make them stop scrolling, I think is the key, right? And just one quick question on that, if I can, Tim. Obviously, the book you wrote before, you've updated it. There's lots of new great stuff in it. But to some degree, you could put it in the repurposed content category. Now, because you're creating content on a constant basis, do you have any metric between repurposing and reusing content versus constantly creating new? Are you leaning one way or the other, or how do you view that sort of operation?
It's a really good question, because I get a lot of people coming to me saying, I've got a tool that can repurpose stuff. Don't use that. There is so many subject areas and so much that, and so creating content is like a muscle. You know, when you first start going to the gym, you can't pick up the weights. After 6 months, you think the weights aren't big enough, and you need to get bigger ones. And it's the same with content. Once you get used to seeing content and understanding it, and there are so many different subjects that I can write about. Now, I will usually take a little bit at the bottom and say, you know, if you're interested in this, then there's my book, and that will be a really good place to start. You know, I'm not asking for you to come and sign a contract with us. Just read the book as your first start into this. But apart from that, most of the stuff that we create is new.
Yeah, thanks for providing that, because I just thought that was an interesting question, because lots of companies spend a lot of time trying to really wring out every dime, every cent from the content that they've already got. And yet some of the, you know, whether they're an individual influencer, a small business, or a global brand, I think people sometimes miss how much content is being produced by these people. It's a lot of work to produce this content, and smart, you know, they figure out processes and ways of doing it. Just like you were saying, I had 15 minutes before we started recording this. I've started a new blog post because I know I need one. So constantly thinking about that new content, I think, is good for people to hear. And then you're kind of using your content, then you know, maybe somewhere down in the content, you'll link them back to something else that you've done somewhere else, as opposed to repurpose that piece.
Yeah, I generally don't repurpose, because I you know, quite often, how many times have you read something and you go, I've read this before, and then you stop reading it? You know, what I'm looking for is insight. I'm looking for, you know, I'm not going to go, oh, there's that person that repurposes all that content, or there's that person that I know writes it all on ChatGPT or whatever. You know, what I want is someone who's authentic, who's like, you know, I don't want someone who's going to come to me and say, you know, what you need to do is have robots, because that's not the way that sales works. It never has been and never will be. And so you just get used to creating content. Now, it may be that what I will do when I create my video will be, the video I will create will be the same subject matter as the blog that's the next day. But apart from that, it's not necessarily repurposed. I think it's about keeping it fresh. And I think my audience understands that as well. What they're looking for is, they're looking for insight. They're looking for, you know, I'm not making my number. We're down on our pipeline. What can I do? Oh, here we are. We've got that bloody Tim Hughes, and he's written I read that blog 12 months ago. Whereas it's interesting, I've had blogs that I wrote back in 2018, just quite recently. You know, so you wrote this blog in 2018. How did you know that was the future? And that's like, well, I don't know. I just didn't. But I don't have a crystal ball, but I kind of had a good feeling in my water that something like that was going to happen. If you're gonna, you know, content, So the point I wanted to also make, this is about prospecting. This isn't about creating content that is fluffy and we're putting it out there. So the important point about, so I've just had a conversation with a guy in a Facebook group last night where he's an accountant, and he went to the LinkedIn and said, what content should I put out? And everyone said, oh, you should put stuff out about accountancy. And I said, no, you shouldn't put anything about accountancy. I said, because all your competition is doing that. And you want to be different, don't you? And he went, yeah. I said, well, why are you putting out stuff? And I found him on LinkedIn. Of course, he gets no engagement because it's all about, I can be your best accountant. And what does all the other accountants say? I can be your best accountant. Buy my product because we're great. Everybody says exactly the same thing. And this is about being different, and about creating content that is different, that is authentic. But the important point, this isn't about creating content to post on social media. This is about conversations, because what I sell requires a conversation. So I create content that generates conversations, because those conversations generate sales. Just as much as I said earlier on, that person did a social audio, and they promoted it on Twitter, and then the person came to the social audio. They were having a conversation on social audio, and then they connected to the person on LinkedIn. Then they had another conversation, probably on Zoom or Teams or something. This is all about generating conversations, because it's the conversations that get sales. Brochures and brochureware and all of that boring stuff that nobody reads on social media doesn't get you conversations. And I have research that shows that.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's the conversations that get the sales. And I suppose I do want to move on to a couple of other questions, Tim, but just to wrap this part up, the term that springs to mind is personal branding. And I'm just interested in your thoughts on that, because the conversations, the social selling, the influencer, the producing of new content, where does that fit into with the salesperson in this case, or a person in general, from a personal brand building perspective? What are your thoughts on that area?
I think the term personal branding has become a little bit overused, and so from a sales perspective, a salesperson has to look good to their buyers. Now, what the salespeople struggle with is it's not about them. It's about your buyers. So it's not what I think is good. It's actually what your buyers think is good. And therefore, quite often personal branding is seen as being bragging, which in the UK, because we're very modest and reserved people, generally we don't like that sort of thing. Whereas it's actually, personal branding is not. It's about, most salespeople understand their marketplace. They understand the business issues that are being faced by their customers. So talk about it. This is what we talk about by being the leading technical commercial digital influencer. Talk about the things that matter to your buyers, because what your buyers will be doing is going boring, brochure. Hey, here's someone that's talking about oil and gas. They seem to know about this. Eric Doyle, I remember that. And then next time, it's Eric Doyle again. He's talking about oil and gas. That's interesting. Or I'm now going to start looking for Eric Doyle. He's got another thing. So what's this Eric Doyle person doing? And then the person will look at the person's Eric Doyle's profile. Now, Eric has professional edition of LinkedIn, so he knows everybody that's looked at his LinkedIn profile. So Eric will send the person a connection request. I see you in oil and gas. How's things at the moment? Oh, well, we're really struggling. Well, what are you struggling? Well, our pipeline's really down. Oh, that's interesting. And this is the thing, that what's happening is that people are looking for insights. They're looking for ways of making their organizations better. And that's what social's about. Did I answer your question?
Brilliantly, yeah. I mean,
Okay, right.
it's great to get
I
insight.
don't remember what it is, so I can't remember.
It's great to get insights about what DLA Ignite, your book, Social Selling, the digital corridors, and the conversations leading to real tangible business. It's great to get that directly from you in terms of how all that links up. Before we run out of time, though, Tim, I do want to ask you a couple of other questions. I like to ask the guests when they're reading, and I know you're an author, but when you're reading, what kind of books? You've got a lot of books for people that are watching the video behind you there on your bookshelf, but what type of genre do you like? Do you read business books, biographies? Are you an audio book kind of person? Do you read for pleasure, for business? How do you take on board information?
So I'm an avid reader, and I read 40 books last year, which is a pretty, some of them I get sent because podcast people, or basically to get endorsements, whatever. But I mean, some that I've got at the moment, The Jolt Effect by Matt Dixon. He was one of the co-authors of The Challenger. This is what I'm actually doing some blogs about at the moment. He's done some research and as you would expect from Matt, having co-written The Challenger, he's found a number of things about what happens when, we're in a situation and a client decides to make no decision and do nothing. He's actually found some research about what that means, and that's what the Jolt Effect is. I'm interviewing Hisha Abrams about holding the calm. She does mediation on organizations. So, for example, there was a person who wanted to sell the business for 35 million, and a person that would only spend 30 million, and they wouldn't move, and she mediated on it. And it's actually quite a funny story. First 90 days, you're in a new job, or you've just been promoted. That is awesome. If you're in digital and want to understand what it's about, or want some background reading, The Digital Helix, that's again is another awesome book. Michael Gale does a podcast on Forbes, and another book, there's a whole load behind me, but this one, Tom Stanfill, about basically getting hold of clients that are being unreceptive to you. Is that enough, or do you want me to carry on?
I get a feeling you could carry on for quite some time, but there's some excellent recommendations. I'll be sure to link those up, Tim. Thanks for sharing those. Now, obviously, on this journey that you're on, having your own business, having your career, everybody that you're interviewing on your own podcast, there must be people along the way, and you've mentioned a few people there, but that have inspired you, that you admire, that you look up to. When I ask you that question, who springs to mind?
Mark Schaefer.
Okay, yeah, I know that.
And I got him to write the foreword to my new book. Mark, I mean, there's a whole bunch of people over the last 10 years that some of them have fallen by the wayside, some of them are retired. But Mark is he's constantly, he's now done 10 books. I mean, you must know Mark, he's got a new book out about community. He's excellent. I would have to promote my team. Eric Doyle, I've already talked about him. He just recently did an amazing TED talk about a race in the desert that he failed at. But he produces some great oil and gas content. My business partner, Adam Gray, Danielle Guzman at Mercer, she's somebody else that's constantly producing great content. And I think that she really gets under the skin sometimes of it's not just content for content's sake. She really thinks about what she's going to talk about. And some of our clients, like the guys at Cyberhawk, I mean, what they put out a post. It was between Christmas and New Year of 2020 to 21. And they said, should we bother? No one's on social media between Christmas and New Year. I don't know, last time I looked, this post has had 1 million views. It's had
Doing something different, standing out.
20,000 shares. I don't know. It was just one of those things that just went.
Yeah.
And it was like, and it's when everyone says, "Oh, there's no one on social media between Christmas and New Year," we always go, "Yeah, but look at this post." So there are some. So it's not just necessarily influencers or content creators. There are non-content creators and influencers that are creating great content. If you understand what I mean.
Yeah, no, that's spot on. And you've mentioned some great people there. I encourage
Keith
everybody.
Keller is another person that is keeps pushing the great content, and he's, the thing is about Keith is that he's constantly looking for what is great content. So you'll do something, oh, that won't work, right? I need to move a bit over here and he's like a precision missile, constantly moving in on his target.
I've heard Keith called a few things, never a precision missile, but I will share that with him, Tim.
Yeah, okay.
He is. He's a bit like a Terminator, though, in his sort of, he's
yeah.
determined to get to the.
But he doesn't see himself as an influencer or a creator.
Yeah,
he
right,
just has a mission, which is to create great content.
Right. Agreed. So I suppose the other thing I wanted to ask you is, when you look at your life now, it could be going back to when you're a child, it could be, in more recent times, but who said something to you from an advice perspective, or what advice have you ever received throughout your career to date that has stayed with you, that you think's great advice that will be with you forever? Or to ask it another way, is there some advice that you are passionately trying to share with people and you wish that people understood more?
Yeah, there's a mistake I made, which is I allowed toxicity to get into the company, and it was a massive mistake. I always say, when people say, "What's the one thing that you regret as a CEO?" and it was allowing that to get into the company for 18 months, and it should have been dealt with. People looked on and watched it, and they could see that it was being allowed to get away with, and it was a mistake.
Yep, that makes perfect sense to me. That can be very, very damaging. So that's a great one for people to be aware of.
It was amazing that how Slack, we run the business on Slack. It was amazing how Slack was a horrible place for 18 months. And it was, once we actually dealt with the problem, it was amazing. I remember going into Slack and going, "Do you know, it's actually nice to be back in here. We're having conversations, nice conversations between each other, without somebody coming in and being toxic."
Yeah, and I suppose it all comes back to culture, doesn't it? It's the culture of the organization. Yeah, it's very, very important. Probably one of the most important things. Now, at the time of recording this, obviously you've got the new book out. You've got an awful lot going on in your own business world, but what are you focused on over the next 12 months? What are you thinking about? What's taking up your mental capacity? What are you hoping to achieve as you move forward, Tim?
Well, we've got a number of things going on. So, we're changing the world. This isn't just a nice to have. This isn't something that we're going to do when we sell out. We're on a mission, and our mission is to change the world. We have a massive vested interest, which is the lots of people in sales and marketing who have tried to take us out. When we first started off, we were seen as a lark, we were a joke, and we're still seen as very niche. COVID, there was a lot of people that suddenly went, "So you need to do business online?" We went, "Yeah, now you're talking." If we move into a recession, there's going to be, some people are going to find it really, really tough. Doing the same things that are not working and expecting to get the same result just isn't going to work. And what we're hoping, and what we have to do, is we do a lot of work where we have to go out and explain that there's an alternative, that the world has moved to digital, and that's what you need to be doing, rather than looking in the wrong place. We're going to be doing more of that. we're hoping to do a little bit more on the LinkedIn Lives to try and spread out the message and explain to people that there is an alternative to cold calling, spamming people with email, advertising, and all that stuff that doesn't work. And basically getting people to realize that there has been this transformation. So it's for us. For us, it's what we've been doing for 6 years, but we keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, and gradually what we find is that more people listen as things work less and less and less and less.
Very good. And yeah, it sounds like you've got a very big, what do they call them? Big audacious goal there.
It's one hell of a mountain to climb. Yes.
Yeah. So look, before we wrap up, the last thing I want to ask you really is, well, firstly, if people want to get hold of you, if they want to find out about your book, if they want to find out about the services that you offer through DLA Ignite, or all the other things that we've talked about today, where do they find you? And the second thing I want you to maybe cover, if there's anything else that you want to focus on. We haven't even talked about your cycling, for example. I know you're an avid cycler. Is there anything else you want to share with our audience today, Tim?
Well, the best place to get me is LinkedIn. I'm Timothy Hughes, or Tim Hughes on LinkedIn. Our website is dlaignite.com. And that's the best way to get hold of us. If you're going to send me a connection request or something, say, I heard you on Simon's podcast and I'd like to connect, or something like that. In terms of the book, it's available on Amazon worldwide. It's available as a Kindle or as a soft copy. There is actually a hard copy available, which I know one person has bought. It's £80, which is about $100. Now the paperback version isn't that amount of money, but I do know one person that's bought that hardback copy. He was very proud of it and sent me a picture of it, and I said I'll sign it next time I'm in France. So that's the best way to get me, is on LinkedIn or through the website. I think you just about covered it. The thing is that for anybody out there, if they're interested in more information, we do an introduction to social media or social selling and influence presentation. All of the people from DLA Ignite can do that, and we can take you through how we see the world using the data that's been created, show you what our clients are doing, and walk you through basically our vision and say what people are doing right now and the results they're getting. So no hard sell. It's just really an explanation, because we kind of find that we need to do that or explain to people, because they're so used to the things that they're doing at the moment and it not working, or what they do is that they just see get rich quick schemes out there in social media and they assume that we're the same. So what we do is that we walk people through that and explain how different we are, and the fact that we have a methodology, the fact that we're backed by the Institute of Sales Professionals and stuff like that, which is, again, nobody else is doing that. So we can walk people through that.
Well, that's fantastic. So look, if you want to walk down some more digital corridors in 2023, I'd encourage you to search out Tim Hughes and everything that he's doing at DLA Ignite. And of course, check out the book, Social Selling. So look, that brings us nicely, Tim, to the end of this episode today on the Global Discussion. Thanks to everybody for watching and listening to this episode. Thanks to Tim. And, please make sure that you like, follow, subscribe, do all the normal things that you do with the podcast. We certainly would appreciate it. And we'd also appreciate if you drop back and see us again for more discussions with creatives, leaders, and thinkers. So thank you, Tim. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Simon. It's been excellent. Thank you. And thank you for people for listening. Really appreciate it.